Programs like the one you are attending today are made possible with the support of these sponsors.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm Joran Liston with NACU, and our webinar today is Navigating Change, and our guest speakers today are Brett Collins and Kelly Ward.
Hi, my name is Brett Collins, you just heard that, and I'm the Auxiliary Services Business Office Manager at Towson University. I am also a adjunct professor for both the Geography Department and the Department of Management.
Hi, I'm Kelly Ward. I used to work with Brett at Towson University, and I've just recently joined the University of Maryland, Baltimore as an organization and employee development specialist. So thank you for having me today. We're going to talk a little bit about navigating through change. That's something that we've been doing for quite some time now, and it doesn't look like that's going to end, even as we kind of start to return to what was a little bit of normal. That normal seems to be changing. So we're going to talk a little bit about what change is, what causes change, and hopefully offer some helpful tips on how to navigate it, both personally and as a leader for your team. So Brett, I will let you kick it off here.
So when we discuss change, and it may have been introduced to you by management or by other individuals, there are some common misconceptions that we get. One of those is that a change isn't a big deal. Oh, you'll be fine, it's not a big deal. But the fact of the matter is that even minor changes can play a significant role on an employee's health. An American Sociological Survey in 2017 found that workers going through change are twice as likely to report chronic work stress, and 4 times as likely to report physical health symptoms at work. You add to that, that about half of change initiatives fail, and only 34% show a clear success. These are pretty significant ramifications and show the seriousness of change.
So another thing we hear is that it's just business, it's not personal. But change can be incredibly personal. How you manage change is personal. It has a lot to do with how you are dealing with, what your capacity for change is right now, how many changes you're trying to manage at the moment. We're all dealing with various types of change. And so many people identify with their jobs. So changing how their job is done can feel like an attack on them personally. People are more likely to report work and life conflict during change and lower levels of job satisfaction.
The other one is we don't need to involve a particular group of people. And in fact, that is a really concerning point of view, because when people aren't involved, they get more stressed out because they don't know what's really going on, and they're not invested in making that change happen because they haven't been included in the solutions and the desire to reach the end result.
Sorry.
So now we want to talk about the truth about change. And the one thing we need to remember is that change is constant and change is needed. On average, organizations have gone through 5 major changes in the past 5 years and expect to go through a major change and another major change in the next 3 years. And these changes are uncomfortable. They get people out of their comfort zone. It creates a situation of uncertainty, which leads to great anxiety.
Even when it's a positive change, I'm going through potentially selling and moving to a new house, and I'm stressed, even though I'm excited about it. So, and then resistance, it's a natural reaction to change. We have fight or flight, gut reactions, and those are natural, they're normal, and you should actually be running with those and not concerned about the fact that you're resisting change, because those can help you identify potential issues and concerns about the upcoming change.
And you know, a lot of people want to know why change is necessary, but organizations do not grow if there's not change. And my big example of this is BlackBerry. If people can remember back in the day, BlackBerry was the #1 cell phone and cell phone company, and they were untouchable. And unfortunately, they thought they were untouchable. Now they don't exist because they refuse to change and get with modern times. And there was this little company called Apple that came up with the iPhone, and it overtook the industry. And it was BlackBerry's lack of change that resulted in its ultimate demise.
So change is a catalyst. And what do we mean by catalyst? It can inspire opportunity, or it can inspire risk, or sometimes a little bit of both. Change can cause a crisis, but crisis also includes opportunity. People can emerge stronger from that change and that crisis. We've all developed some really new vital skills this past year during telework. These are going to serve us well going forward. We're getting a little more technological savvy and learning new ways to collaborate and create access for people. I know in the training world, there are people who couldn't leave their jobs to attend some of the trainings, and now that we're in this hybrid environment, there's much more access to resources for people now.
And, you know, when we go through the change process and whichever version it is, whether it's crisis or just through the desire to have strategic changes, we need to expect mistakes because they will happen. And we need to be flexible and open-minded. And if we follow a course of action that isn't functioning or working the way we envisioned it, we need to be comfortable enough to recognize the mistake and that it's not going the way we want, and then transition into a new mode of working so that we can actually reach the success we ultimately want. So this brings us basically to, I believe, the next slide.
Actually, there's one more point.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
See mistakes, we have to embrace them.
Change is not linear. You're not going to go through the beginning to the end in this straight path. It's inevitable that something is going to happen. There's going to be a different response in the different systems that it touches. There's no way for you to predict the future or to know what some of those unexpected changes might be. So you have to be a little bit flexible. So, you know, starting a new job, you have no idea if the culture is what you expect it's going to be. You have no idea how your team is going to be. So you can't predict those kind of things with change.
All right, now I'm up, huh? So there are different types of change, and we really need to recognize the impacts. And crisis is the big one, which we've all experienced recently. And it can have, hopefully we have a general plan of action, but when a crisis takes place, it can lead to dramatic, immediate shifts in how we do things. Certainly transitioning from being in the office, working every day, knowing our expectations, to having to transition to telework and working from home, or balancing that process was very dramatic. Some places handled it a little better than others. And that contrasts with the other versions. There should be a link on crisis, Kelly.
Oh, yes.
So I just wanted to have a quick view of this. And among essential and non-essential workers reporting mental illness during the pandemic, 42% of essential workers showed symptoms of anxiety and depressive disorders, 30% of non-essential workers. So even individuals working from home had a clear effect, even though they may have been in a slightly better situation than the person who had to go in day to day. And I would like to point out that the essential worker isn't the traditional, emergency services, doctors and nurses. That also includes grocery store clerks, postal workers, individuals who had to be out functioning day to day just like they always were. And you can look at the other items in that slide if you have a moment. But I think the point is that we need to be aware that when a crisis happens, the mental and physical toll that it takes on individuals, whether they're dealing with a work displacement or also the concerns that they may be dealing during the crisis with family members and everything else, really needs to be looked at as we manage our way and lead our way through change.
So another process for change is evolution, and that's gradual change that could be personal. As you age, we're dealing with the physical changes that come from that, having your children grow up, leave the home, having empty nest syndrome, or professionally as technology comes in and more things become automated and our jobs change. So we deal with that in different ways than we deal with a crisis. With a crisis, you have that reaction, a coping, a quick response. With this, we learn new skills to cope with that technology. Life goes on. There's some changes, but there's usually a little less growth. You have that major growth within crisis, forced growth.
And then the last real type of change is strategic change. Hopefully it's well thought out and it's deliberate and it's planned. Now that can be a personal strategic change, but also organizationally. BlackBerry obviously was not thinking forward and making strategic changes in their company, which is what led to their ultimate demise.
So there are different phases of change. And the one thing that I really noticed when looking at this is we talk about phases of grief too. And both of them start with denial and some resistance. And I think it's important to note that with change often comes loss. And that's why there's some of that mirroring here, because you're losing that familiarity of what you've had. But there's this, we'll talk about this model of 4 phases, and it's the danger zone. That's your denial and your resistance. And then you have the opportunity zone, which is your exploration and your commitment. Most people go through these 4 phases in every transition that they make. You can go quickly through the phases, or you can get kind of stuck in some of them. So it's really important to make sure that you have effective leadership to help guide your members through these different phases. Denial's the first place people go when change is announced. People often, even when there's a big announcement, they just go right back to work. Like it hasn't really sunk in yet. They just do work as usual. It seems that things are just going to kind of continue and nothing's going to be affected. And this stage can be prolonged if employees are not encouraged to discuss their reaction. Often leaders forget to kind of discuss how employees are feeling about it. And at that point, they can get stuck in that denial. And then that's going to impede the progression of healing from that loss to moving forward. Staff are going to stay focused on the way things used to be. This is the way we've always done it. They're not going to explore how they can or how they need to change. So managers can think people have jumped into that final phase of commitment because they're actually not speaking to their employees and talking to them about how they feel about that. And then the focus will get placed on the individual rather than the organization's response to the change. And they don't see why people have trouble with change or believe that they're not being able to put aside their feelings or that they're just being difficult, when really it's that the organization is not helping guide the change a little bit more.
And then we transition into that resistance zone, right? And that's where we begin to get frustration, anger, anxiety, and this is really, to have the depression because you've now gone from denying it and now actively working against it because you don't want that change to take place. Now, no matter how positive you are to change and how generally you are receptive to change, or if you are not receptive to change, we all go through these stages. And so it's very important for leaders, and whether it's your co-workers or your supervisor or you supervise people, to realize these signs of resistance and have conversations with the individuals who are really struggling. And one-on-one personal conversations to allow those individuals to express why they're resistant and why they're upset, so that they can be moved forward and hopefully mitigate the negative impacts of resistance. Because if you have one individual who's really going into a bad place and you can't pull them out, that can really affect the rest of the individuals when you're in an ultimate position that you need to move forward and actually implement the change, because there is a point where you're not really going to have a choice other than to implement the change.
Sorry, I'm having technical difficulty with my speakers here. So the next phase is exploration, and this is after people begin to come a little bit out of that resistance phase. People can notice that people are feeling creativity coming back. There's a renewed interest in their job again. There's still some uncertainty in this exploration phase due to ambiguity, but people begin to get excited and energy is focused on that future. Staff will focus their attention on the external environment rather than how they're being personally impacted. They try to figure out new responsibilities, search for new ways to relate to each other, learn more about how things are going to work, answer some of the questions that are there. There's still some stress and a little uncertainty, but people will become a little more creative to figure out ways to capitalize on the future. And if you're comfortable with ambiguity, you can start to get excited and exhilarating at this point. And you can create new bonds in your work group as you explore some of those feelings of excitement and possibility.
And then finally, we get to the spot where we all want to be, and that's getting a commitment from staff to make the change and reach the end result. And staff are prepared to learn new ways to work together, renegotiate roles and expectations. They're ready to focus on a plan. They're willing to recreate their mission and build action plans to make it work. They are prepared to learn new ways to work together and have renegotiated roles. And I'm obviously looking at a document that I think I just repeated a sentence. So the point being, we reached an ultimate area where every individual is focused on the success of the change. But we need to realize that people are going to reach that commitment point at different periods. So once you have an individual reach that commitment point, your energies can be less focused on them, and then you need to focus your energies on the individuals who haven't quite gotten there yet. And hopefully with that committed employee, they can help you move the rest of the group into that commitment phase.
Yes, it's important for leadership to remember that when they, especially those middle managers, when they get a directive from higher up, they have to go through these phases too. They're going through denial, resistance, and then they've kind of gotten to that exploration phase by the time they're communicating those changes to their staff. And managers will often forget that their staff need to then go through those phases. So it's important to remember to allow your staff to have the same opportunity to experience that denial and resistance and work through those feelings before you're expecting them to just jump right into commitment. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying to, okay, there we are.
All right, so what we need to recognize here and why it's important to have these discussions is ultimately change is going to happen. And there are significant concerns that every leader, every manager, every individual in the structure of an organization needs to be concerned about. The Institute for Public Relations in 2019 surveyed a group of change leaders and asked them what was the most common frustration as they implemented change. And over 50% was navigating change fatigue. So it's keeping the energy level up for individuals to continue forward. People get tired, and when there's constant change, it's hard to keep the energy levels high. Add to that the other 35% was generating and sustaining momentum. What you have there is basically motivation of employees, right? So you're looking at over 80% the concern of individuals responded that the concern is motivating and keeping those employees in a positive direction. And then the biggest challenge I anticipate in driving business information over the next 5 years was employees will become disengaged and exhausted. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, that especially as we've been dealing with this pandemic for the last year and a half, that people are getting tired. They've had to transition home and their whole world was upset. Now they're having to transition back, and with coming back, there are all kinds of new things that they need to learn, whether it's making sure that people have their masks on and ensure the public safety because of the disease, or whether we've just learned and changed processes because we've learned through the pandemic that there are easier ways we may be able to do things, and now we're changing those particular processes.
So we've talked a little bit about resistance, and let's dive deeper into what causes resistance. So people don't necessarily resist change itself, but they resist being changed. As I mentioned earlier, people identify a lot with their job. So some of the possible causes for resistance to change are fear of the unknown, fear of that loss of control, loss of their identity and their association, their sense of belonging, meaning, loss of confidence, because they know really well how to do their job the way they're doing it right now, but they might not really know how to handle it as well once the changes have been made. And then their vision for the future and where they thought they might be going has all of a sudden changed. So that's quite a bit of loss to have to process. There's also that fear of failure, looking stupid or incompetent, and a disruption of interpersonal relationships. You go from being equals to being a subordinate when your peer is promoted to supervisor. You've got personality conflicts, politics, cultural assumptions and values, and then there's also the possibility for a lack of confidence in leaders who are in charge of driving this change. And that often happens because of a lack of communication. Leaders typically under-communicate by a factor of 10 during times of major change. And that's because leaders are people too, and they're going through their own phases in that roller coaster of change. So if your leader's still in denial, but they're being pushed to process this change, they're going to be even less likely to be able to communicate effectively to you. And then there's that lack of buy-in. We've all experienced a change where we just don't understand why it's happening, and it's hard to really buy into it when it doesn't make sense to us. So not being involved in the planning often is a cause of that lack of buy-in, having no say in that process. So involving people, we go back to some of those myths of change and how it's, well, this person doesn't need to be involved. Honestly, the more people you involve, the more buy-in you'll probably get.
So how do we deal with it? You know, and it's tough and it can be exhausting, but the first thing we need to do is realize that no matter how minor or how significant the change is, we should anticipate that resistance is going to take place. Then how we choose to deal with it is important. The first step is to listen to the concerns of the people around you, whether they're coworkers or whether they're subordinates. And oftentimes, especially if you have someone having a really difficult time, you should be having regular private meetings to listen, not always react right off the bat, and try and help them understand the reasons for their concerns, acknowledge their emotions. That can be challenging, especially if your personality makes those emotional conversations make you uncomfortable, but you need to embrace it and acknowledge the concerns of individuals. What might not be a big deal to you may be a very, very big concern to someone else. And we should respect that, and we should do our best to understand and give that person space to work through it and help them where we can. Have conversations to say, okay, if that's your concern, but what do you think what are the ultimate ramifications? What are the real causes of your concern? Is it your feelings of lack of control, your feelings that you are not being taken seriously, that people don't think you're doing your job well, so therefore they want to change it? These really affect people. And the best way to mitigate that is to inform and share information with them, explain to them what the benefits is to those individuals. And while listening to their current concerns, try to remove the obstacles that may be giving them the most anxiety. Then we may want to move our world forward, but maybe there's a way we can connect the old ways to the new ways to slowly transition them so that they can feel like they have more control, and always be willing to and open to listen and explore options and suggestions that other people have. And I think it's important to note here that these are behaviors we should be doing, whether it's with coworkers who may be struggling, or whether we have the legitimate authority to tell an individual to do something. It's always better to have the discussions and work with them and have them participate in moving forward.
So some steps to successfully cope with change. Be clear about your vision for the change. It's harder to accept when individuals don't know the reason why they have to make this change. So as I said, if you can involve them in the planning, even better. If not, be clear about why. Connect the change to the bigger picture of the organization, aligning your departmental piece of this change and why it's happening and how it supports the mission of the organization will help give people a sense of urgency to move forward and buy into that change. And try to give them full context so they can process that bigger picture. There's often a 31% gap in understanding between upper levels of management and frontline workers. So when there's an open source change strategy, then there's only a 3% change gap. So that vision is important.
And it's important to give your team the floor, bring them all in, let them participate. Just 34% of top-down changes are successful. That's people at the top dictating and not getting input from lower groups, especially the first level employee and middle managers. That's compared to 58% success rate for collaborative open source processes. Let your team play a part in how you are going to implement the change. They have good ideas. They're doing the day-to-day work. Oftentimes, if you just dictate from the top, you're going to miss a key element that may change the success rate of the change you're trying to make. It allows individuals to feel in control and vested into the implementation of the change. You're getting their input, therefore now they care about that change. They're not just being told what to do. Allow the team to share questions, their concerns, and give you feedback and give them feedback. It's a collaborative process. That's how we get success in implementing change. And then you want to use time to build a sense of community by confronting the change together. I can tell you, I've never been prouder of my staff through the pandemic, because we were given certain challenges. We discussed them. We had a vision. We were able to go out and help other departments that were struggling because of hiring shortages. And we not only performed well during the pandemic and during the changes, we as a group became a much, much stronger unit. The respect level and the appreciation for each other really increased across the board. And that's where you really want to be.
Share your action plan with your staff to the best of your ability. As we've mentioned, there's no way you can know all of the possible contingencies that could happen as you go through this change. But if you share and tell them what you expect to happen, what they can expect to happen, will ease their nerves and will also increase their motivation. It will help them to have clarity and visibility in what's going on. People really need that sense of transparency. When you're not communicating that action plan and you're not communicating the change, then their imagination can tend to run a little dark, and they're worried about what they're not being told. So share that action plan as much as possible.
And of course, as we discussed, you need to account for resistance, and you need to get the buy-in. If you don't get the buy-in to moving the program forward in implementing a change, it can result in disagreement, resulting in a negative impact on morale. And if you've seen a department that is going through a change and not everybody is on board, there is a significant level of negativity and will probably lead to either individuals leaving or the change not being implemented the way you want it to. 70% of team engagement is influenced by the manager. So it's important for the manager to be positive about the change and not really speak negatively about it. And that can be difficult because sometimes the manager doesn't understand the reason of the change either, but it still is a responsibility to make sure it's implemented. So if you are managing people or you're leading a team, it's important, even if you disagree with the change, if you've ever seen our discussion on followership, this is where you practice good followership and you be a cheerleader for that change. Because the honest truth is, not being a cheerleader for it is not really going to look good on you or your department. And it's better to move your people into a positive space. And you don't want to be the reason for their negative thoughts and the decrease in morale. You want to increase one-on-one meetings with the people who are struggling and really work with them. And I think, as I've said before, that is one of the most important things that a manager and a leader does, and it is one of the most exhausting things, because if you have someone who is really struggling, whether they're struggling with the change because it impacts their personal life or it just impacts their job in general. It's important to constantly meet with them and discuss their feelings and bring them along. It's what successful leaders and managers do. And the last part of this is a lot of times the resistance is purely out of fear of the unknown and of change. And with good communication and with meeting with them and reassuring them, you're going to get them past that and be able to get them on board.
Another important part of this change is often we're scrambling a little bit during these changes, even when you're planning as well as you can. You really need to make time for recognition. You want to celebrate the wins you have, big ones and small ones, that will help buffer any negative effects of change. It's important, even if you're not meeting your goals, you can still celebrate the efforts toward the goals. You can celebrate your staff's commitment to reaching those goals and encourage them to see any, I wouldn't say failure, but yeah, failure or mistakes or missteps along the way as a learning opportunity. And so encourage those things, continue to be positive, and that will help push people to keep going, even though they're tripping a little bit along the way. You're going to help bring them back up and push this change along. It's a process. Successful change requires continued work. Even training programs have to be part of your change. 69% of effective change management offers training before and after you go live with a new software or a new process is implemented. So make sure that you're including training in your process as well.
So now the next step is, after we enjoy this wonderful little frog in the rain, the next steps are, what do we do to build resilience to change? And, some people are much more comfortable living in that kind of manic, hectic, things constantly going all over the place. And it's easier for them than others. But there are ways we can make it easier for individuals to bridge that gap and build a resilience to the constant changes that they need to prepare themselves for. The first thing you can do is you can compartmentalize your cognitive load. Now that's a big fancy statement for saying, organize your day. Schedule your day in ways where you're not constantly switching from task to task. Those who constantly switch from task to task, their productivity drops by about 40%, because you have to completely reorient your mind. So schedule time. I'm going to check emails from 9 to 9:30. I'm going to have a meeting with my staff from 9:30 to 9:15. I'm gonna work on this project at this time. You're laying out a plan in your day, which will make you more productive, and also allow you to reduce your stress level, because now you're having a little bit of control. You want to reduce your context switching. So that's that switching from one activity to another. Maybe if you have an office door, shut your door so you're not interrupted with other people's concerns and issues at the immediate moment. And basically, organize your day so that you have more control. You also want to take detachment breaks. Mental focus and energy cycles typically run about 90 to 120 minutes. And after that, you lose productivity and you lose concentration. So really, no matter how busy you are, you should try and occasionally take a break every hour, even if it's to walk down to the restroom, get a drink of water, maybe have a 5-minute conversation with a coworker about their day, and then go back to the tasks. You'll be much more successful doing that. Then you want to develop mental agility, decenter stress. And that's the process of being able to pause, observe the experience from a neutral standpoint, and then try to solve the problem. So when you're given a task that might be stressing you out, you want to take a deep breath, recognize that it is stressing you out, and then try and take a step back and look at it from a different angle to see where your concerns are and maybe how you can move forward.
Another important part to building resilience is cultivating compassion, both with yourself and your coworkers. You need to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. We hear that word self-care, but you need to make sure that when you are having those internal thoughts with yourself, that you are saying things that you would say to other people. We have a tendency to be our own worst critics. So be compassionate with yourself as you're going through this change. Remember, you are only human. And communicate with your coworkers, your supervisors on how to manage job stress, identify areas of stress, and work together to help reduce them for the team. Talk openly with your supervisor. Hopefully you have that trusted relationship with your supervisor and your team members so that you can discuss how that change is affecting you and how communicate with your team how to access mental health resources in the workplace. Most of us have some kind of guidance resources or an employee assistance program. Make sure that your team is aware of the assistance and the resources available to them. Identify those things that you don't have control over and do your best with the resources available to you, which you may need to take a resource inventory. Don't forget your resources include, your departmental budget and your staffing and that kind of thing, but it's also about your time, your energy, and don't forget about your network, your professional network, and can really be helpful to you in times of change. Reach out to someone who may have gone through something similar. So take that resource inventory and see if there are other tools that you have at your disposal that you're not using. And Brett talked about maintaining that sense of control and re-owning that, take back some of the power over your day. Trying to keep a regular sleep schedule. I know that's a challenge for me every day to try to get to bed on time, but that can really help you in managing stress. As Brett said, take a break, stretch, exercise, check in with a colleague, and being outdoors, either being active or just going out to relax and recenter if you can get outside for lunch on a nice day, and maybe work on practicing some mindfulness techniques. All of these are really great tips to build resilience.
So ultimately, our ultimate goal is whether you are a manager of people or you just are want to be more proactive in the success of a change for a group you may be associated with. You want to be a change agent. So we want to acknowledge the ambivalence that may occur. And we want to recognize and remember that roller coaster diagram, that while we may be in a different arc of the diagram and of the acceptance of the change, other individuals may not be. And we can recognize when we're not in the right spot and work forward to try and move ourselves to the more positive areas of that arc. And also try and help those individuals who aren't quite where they should be, help to bring them along. It'll help you be successful in your future. And then we also want to be future focused. We want to think beyond the here and now, think of the positives that this change will have for us, and allow us to, while we're going through a tough time and struggling through change, because change is always difficult, now think of the positive things we will receive in the future once that change is implemented and functioning the way we want it. Of course, we always want to maintain optimism and show gratitude for the people around us and the things that they do for us. We want to be individuals that are given that task to implement something, and we want to participate in the solutions and make suggestions and ideas, because we all have unique insights. And since we all come from different perspectives, we may have a unique insight that someone else hasn't thought of that may be the key to the success of that whole plan. We also want to stay open-minded. And when someone else comes to us from their different perspective and give us an idea, we want to be open-minded and seriously consider that idea. Because again, they may have the key to the success of that whole plan. We want to take risks. Sometimes change, and change is a risky proposition because we all want it to go perfect and we all want to be successful. But sometimes the risk is worth it because you may get great rewards. And if you never take a risk, you're never going to get great rewards, and you're going to stay stagnant. And staying stagnant, as we know, could ultimately lead to the lack of success of the organization overall. We need to be understanding and patient with each other, especially in those early stages of that arc, right? Before we get commitment, we need to understand that some people may be a little snippy and a little stressed out, which may have them act in a way that may not be the most constructive, but we want to be understanding and patient. And along with that, so we don't get snippy and aggravated, we want to recognize and accept our stress and try to manage it, whether it's, all right, I'm frustrated right now, I need to go take a walk and take a deep breath. Call that person that you trust just to vent and just get things off your chest, because a lot of times just talking about things can reduce your stress level. You obviously have to have people that you trust and who are good listeners, and you want to be a good listener as well. So at this point, Kelly, do you have anything else to add?
No, but we did have some questions in the chat. Somebody suggested they would like the suggestions we included on building resilience, and we'll be happy to share that. So I assume, Joran, that this will be posted somewhere. Can we add a list to it?
Yes, absolutely. It'll be posted on NACU TV, and we're happy to share the list that you provide.
Great.
And if anybody has a question, please feel free to type it in the chat window or turn your camera on and jump into the discussion.
Oh, Kim, Kim asked if there was we could tell her about our experience putting these strategies into action. And Brett, I think when we discussed this session, you had a couple examples, perhaps your move and some of the things that you've had to do to manage that change.
Well, I mean, I think I can look specifically, and I don't want to get into specifics too much because I want to make sure individuals' privacy is respected. But as we implemented these changes going into the pandemic, it was understood that that my department had to have a presence on campus. So what I did was I got everybody in that were the principals of my department. I have some departments that I have one department that didn't need to be on campus because their workload being in events was basically there were no events. But what I did was I got them together. We all discussed. I discussed how I would like to proceed, and then I listened to how they would like to proceed, and we came up with a plan. I tried to be equitable in that plan. I had individuals that were managers willing to come in and cashier, working in other departments so that they could be successful. And what we did was we also split up the work. So no one individual had to be on campus all the time. And we divided in a 5-day week. And 1 week, I may be in 3 days, and the individual I was swapping time with would be in 2 days. And next week, they would be in 3 days and I would be in 2 days. And then we would divide that up so no one took that burden on, right? And we came up with a plan where everybody felt valued, and everybody understood that no one individual was being unfairly treated. I also had individuals that were going through pretty significant family concerns. And with those family concerns, they weren't necessarily pandemic related, but they were having a significant impact, right? So it was talking with them on a regular basis and having people talk to me. I had a significant issue through that as well, where my father had injury and started showing issues with dementia, where, at times I needed support because I was not in the best state of mind because of personal stuff. So the key to it all was regularly talking, being open-minded, being empathetic, and understanding not, hey, they're not handling it the way I'm doing it, where I've been told that sometimes I do that. But to listen, give them the space they need and give them the time to resolve the issues they had, and to make sure that they knew that they were supported by their coworkers and myself, to make sure that they could get the time and what they needed. And ultimately, we went through the various changes, and now we're transitioning back. We have very good ideas of moving forward because some of the changes we made during the pandemic, we looked at each other and went, why weren't we always doing this? Because this is great. So, and now we're coming back to campus, and we're having a big change where our department is moving from the union building over to another building, and that's caused stress. And how do we do that? And how can we implement that and move forward? So I don't know if that answered your question, but sorry, Kelly, I went on a rant there.
We have another question from Abe. Should you share changes and experiences to your family and loved ones? I assume you're saying share that with supervisors and coworkers. Is that what your question is about? I just want to make sure I'm answering what you're asking.
So if that's the question, I will say, depends on your comfort level. I, as a manager, can't say, tell me what's going on with you, but I can sit and give the space. And if that employee wants to have a conversation and open up, and really, it has to do with your comfort level with your coworkers and your supervisors. I think it's important to be open. If I'm struggling with something, to let my supervisor know that, so that if I'm having a tough time in a particular day, he can understand where that's coming from, and just me not being difficult or argumentative, because we all hit those spots. And a lot of it, I can tell you, I have an individual that is very introverted and is very private. And with that, it's just sitting, being open, saying, hey, if you need anything, let me know. And just leave it at that until they're comfortable talking and telling you their experiences.
Any other questions out there? Did that answer your question, Abe? Kinda.
Tribe, if you want to contact me directly, I'm happy to talk to you about it and we can get into details if that makes it easier for you.
I don't think there's any one answer to that question, honestly. I do think Brett hit on it when he said it depends on your relationship with your supervisor, but here we are asking people to empathize with others, but they can't empathize with you if they don't know what's going on. So I'm an advocate for sharing, but I understand that not all people have that relationship with a supervisor or their coworkers that they're willing to put it all out there. So I would find at least one trusted person that you can share that with who can maybe help you advocate for yourself if you're really struggling.
And the honest truth is, if you're really having a difficult time that is truly, truly negatively impacting your performance, it's going to reach a point where if you're not opening up to your supervisor to explain why, then you're probably going to reach a point where you're hitting a disciplinary issue, and then it gets to HR, and then, you know, it behooves you to have that conversation before it gets so bad. Maybe you need to have a week off to deal with your stuff and not saying a suspension, but have a conversation. All right, you're dealing with stuff. Would you like to take some time off? And we'll cover you while you take that time off to deal with the whatever issue you're having in your personal life. 3 minutes, then we got to cut it down. So any questions would be, now's the time to ask them.
Okay, well, we will go ahead and wrap up unless somebody puts in a last minute question. But Grace in Space was my theme in the pandemic. And when I will try to carry forward of just giving everybody a little space and doing it gracefully. And I have had people say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you. It's just been, and it's just like, don't worry about it. It's okay. And I think we've all been there, and we'll all catch up on our friendships and our emails and whatever. And we're all good. So these were really, really helpful strategies. Thank you. And as I said, we will post a link to this recording, and the slides and the list and everything will be on NACU TV. Brett and Kelly, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insights. I know you guys have taught a course in this, and so we appreciate you honing it down to an hour. It's just been wonderful. Talking about being stressed out, our event next week, we are starting a series of TED Talks. So we heard that people were having a hard time actually finishing a book during a pandemic, and I'm right there with you. So we've moved into TED Talks, and we will watch a TED Talk together and then discuss it. And the first TED Talk is Stressed Out, Ways to Remain Calm. So I think that this session dovetails nicely into the next one. And so I hope that you all go to NACU.org and register for that and our other events. And if you have a future TED Talk or a webinar that you would like to talk about, please let me know and we will get you on the schedule. So again, special thanks to Brett and Kelly for being here, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. I'm Joran Liston with NACU. Enjoy the rest of your day.